Italy was my way into writing. I'd always wanted to do it but never felt brave enough or felt I had anything to write about. Until returning from a year in Florence, with nothing you could call a career under my belt and the prospect of returning to an office for full-time work pretty remote, I found a way of starting to write something substantial. The further I pushed on with my little project, the more I understood about Italy and about art. You can't just have beauty. Where there is humankind there is dark and there's light. So I ended by writing a thriller about a murdered Nigerian girl beside the road in Siena, and eventually, over the course of subsequent novels, my interest firmed into a detective series set in Florence. He was Sandro Cellaini, 60-ish, something of a pessimist, a realist with a romantic streak a mile wide, in love with his wife of more than 30 years, tender-hearted, gruff, hapless on occasion, and a dogged, shrewd detective. The first time you sit down to try to write, which for me was 14 years ago, what hits you straight away is how exposing an activity it is. You're putting yourself down on the page, even if you're writing about people 1,000 miles away who are nothing like you, and you have to take a hard look at how clever or funny or profound you are or are not. Of course I agonize, all the time. It's the only way to make sure it's as good as it can be. I am terrified of reviews. I was happy to be an under-the-radar writer, never really reviewed, because it was one thing less to worry about.
When in Florence, most tourists and study abroad students only get to know one side of the river, the areas around the Duomo, the Palazzo Vecchio and Santa Croce. However, according to many locals, the real Florence lies across the river. We're here in the San Niccolò area, where there are several landmarks that are worth a visit.
The San Niccolò Tower is one of the most visible landmarks in the area. Built in the early 14th century, it was one of 15 gates that led into the walled city of Florence. In the summer, visitors can climb up to the top for magnificent views of the city. In the heart of the area is the San Niccolò Parish Church, first built in the 12th century. After a fire in the 15th century, it was rebuilt by inhabitants of the quarter and further enriched in the 16th century, when the rose window on the facade was added. The area boasts some of Florence's best coffee shops and restaurants, especially in the piazza of the parish church. This makes it a fun, youthful area, especially before dinner when both young and old Florentines meet up after work for an aperitif. Just behind the main square is the hill that leads to the famous Piazzale Michelangelo, one of the few touristy areas of the San Niccolò neighborhood. Built in 1869, when Florence was the capital of Italy, the Piazzale has panoramic views of the entire city. A copy of Michelangelo's David presides over the square, and behind it you'll find the beautiful Basilica of San Miniato al Monte, the most striking example of Florentine Romanesque. On a nearby hill overlooking Florence is Villa Bardini and its stunning gardens. Today, the villa holds both permanent and temporary exhibits and museums, as well as a restaurant and a bar. The garden is open to the public and is well worth a visit for its landscaping, wildlife, statues, and views of the city. The San Niccolò area is a great place to escape the tourist masses and experience a more authentic side of Florence. A walk among its restaurants, towers, gardens, and museums is indeed a great way to spend an afternoon.
That's quite easy for me. The thought of choosing one children's book, I think most people have the same response because everybody remembers that book that got them launched into the sort of a career of reading. And for me, it was Joan Aiken. Actually, she wrote a series, and the first one is The Wolves of Willoughby Chase, and I absolutely loved that book. But the first one I read of the series was the second one in the series, which is called Black Hearts in Battersea. So I would find it hard to choose between those two, but The Wolves of Willoughby Chase is absolutely brilliant, absorbing, pseudo-historical, brilliant characters, lots of action, lots of outfits actually, frocks, many frocks in Joan Aiken. I love her. She's brilliant. If I'm talking my genre, I would say crime. The Big Sleep by Raymond Chandler is an absolute winner. It's got a huge cast of brilliant characters. He's wonderful at creating atmosphere in Los Angeles. in the I think it's sort of 30s, 40s, rainstorms and bungalows and dodgy servants and glamorous heiresses. It's just got everything you possibly want. In terms of literature, there are other books, but Chandler covers all the bases for me, actually. I don't do research, really. I don't know what research could consist in when what you're interested in is experimenting with. Research, as I've already said, it's my, in a way, it's my life. It's the basics of it. It's putting myself into a situation that of extremists. You know, the difficulties of being a parent, a mother, the difficulties of a new relationship under strain, and then you impose on it from outside something horrible, murder. I don't investigate murders. I think most human beings are quite capable of imagining in fairly fine and horrible detail what it would feel like to have a bereavement, a violent crime committed. And I think that, in my case, certainly too much research would detract from that instinctive feeling for how that pans out in someone's life. But I did do a tiny bit of research into family liaison officers, because there's a key character in the book. It's a family liaison officer who comes to talk to Fran after the crime, after the terrible thing she discovers on her doorstep. I don't know really what domestic noir means, because it's such an enormous, in theory, an enormous category. George Eliot could have wrote domestic noir. Charlotte Bronte wrote domestic noir. I'm not comparing them myself to them, but I think writing about what happens inside a house is everyone knows about that. Everyone relates to that. Domestic means what happens in the hearth, in the home, on the hearth, right there, where you are looking after children or doing the cooking. Of course, to me, that is violence and death and destruction come not just to your door, but inside your door. I mean, what could be more frightening than that? I find it horrifying when thousands of people are killed in a war, but it doesn't have that same intensity of deeply personal fear when somebody's coming after you into your home through your front door or your back door, more usually, behind you, coming up behind you as you're at the sink. That's where the real violence is in terms of actual crimes committed. Almost all murders are committed by people you know, and inside your own home. I've just completed another standalone psychological thriller set in England. My previous history as a writer was that I wrote a series of detective stories set in Italy, set in Florence. I've also written standalone set in Italy, and this was me coming to England, which for a long time I didn't think I would be able to do, writing about England, because it seemed too close to home and too safe, really. I couldn't dramatise it enough in my own head. But I seem to have found a voice where I can see the darkness. Perhaps it's getting older, perhaps it's the world getting more dangerous, perhaps it's feeling that danger more intensely. But I think I would certainly, I don't want to stop writing them at the moment at all. I also, when one has written a series, there is a certain comfort involved with that. You come back to the same characters and you really love those characters, otherwise you couldn't go on with a series. And there's a certain comfort involved with starting and you sitting down to start a new book, and some of your pieces are already in place. So writing a series gets you very comfy, and it's, as a writer, you know that's probably not a good idea. So I'm very glad that I propelled myself, and was propelled, to be honest, by various editors to have the courage to try writing about England and writing standalones without going back to the same characters all the time. And I feel like it works at the moment. I feel like it's really, really working. So I would always go on with it. It's a matter of coming up with another idea every time, but I've just finished one, as I say, and now I've got to spend a couple of weeks thinking what to do next, what to write next. But I don't think it'll be a problem. I'm looking forward to it.